Good morning. Welcome to episode 92 of the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on the news and stories impacting the drilling and water industry. I'm your host, Brock Yordy, and for this week in the news, we'll start in Toledo, Ohio, where 5 companies have agreed to pay the federal government more than $7.2 million in claims of pollution to the Maumee River watershed, which leads into Lake Erie. Next, we'll continue the water quality impact discussion with a January 8th release of the National Academy of Science the latest study on microplastics in bottled water, and the recommendations throughout the world we see on the seriousness of microplastics. Our feature this week is the rest of the story of The Well from Hell with Edd Schofield, where Ed and I discuss point counterpoint on polyacrylamides and well constructions. And it's a great primer for as we start all of these several weeks of state association groundwater shows and all the professional development and learning. These are the conversations that we should be having as professionals to help progress our industry, especially as we see microplastics in surface water and how important harnessing groundwater really is. But before we jump in to all this great content, let's talk some safety. On December 19th, 2023, the National Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries released the 2022 report. Yes, that's right. We are a year behind in all of these. And we know in 2022 in construction industry, 39 men lost their lives in trench collapses. So let's talk 2022 fatalities and how the construction industry sadly led a lot of the statistics. In 2022, there were 5,486 fatal work injuries recorded in the United States. In 2022, a 5.7% increase from that 5,190 that happened in 2021. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported on December 19th that the fatal work injury rate was 3.7 fatalities per 100,000 full-time equivalent workers, and went up from 3.6 per 100,000 that we had for a study that came out last year for 2021. This data shows the fatal occupational injuries and the picture that is. And this is what we need to be thinking about industry. Workers in transportation and material moving occupations experienced 1,620 fatal work injuries in 2022 and represented the largest group with the most fatalities. The next highest was what we talk about a lot, industry. It was the category of construction and extraction workers with 1,056 fatalities. That's an 11% increase from 2021. On top of all of that, and this is something that I think we all need to be thinking about with the inclement weather and the slippery roads and everything that winter is finally here, is transportation incidents remained the most frequent type of fatal event, accounting for 37% of all fatalities. There were 2,066 fatal injuries from transportations in 2022. And we can see this is leading already as 2023 has wrapped up, that it's going to be much higher. Next, fatalities due to exposure to temperature extremes increased 18.6% in 2022, rising to 51 from 43 in 2021. Again, why are we talking about this study right now when we've just gone through 2023 and we know that there's a whole nother study being looked at? Is because summer 2023 was one of the hottest on records. And I think we really need to understand that if we're at 18.6 increase from 2022, what does that look like for 2023? And how do we need to be treating our people this year to prevent this? Going on, fatalities specifically due to environmental heat were 43 in 2022, up from 36. It's going to be even worse when we see this report come out in 2023. And these are things we need to think about. So, as it is now the third week of January, and we have our crews back up and working, and we have these big winter storms coming through, we got to think about hand injuries. We got to think about repetitive stress. We need to think about the bulkiness, the clothes we're wearing, hypothermia, and that heat-related illnesses and cold-related illnesses look very similar as individuals become lethargic and unresponsive. And we need to be paying attention to this on top of all the other aspects of danger that's in our industry. If we see where we are in 2022, and we have seen that we continue to edge up in the fatalities per 100,000 workers, it's unacceptable. 2022, every 96 minutes, a worker died on the job. 2021, it was 101 minutes. It's time for us to make sure we have the right standard operating procedures, the right safety culture, and above all, a stop work authority that allows for us to all get recentered and prevent those catastrophic incidents before they happen. Go out, be safe. Think about what I'm saying here. We're too precious of an industry. All workers are too precious to lose their life on the job. Be safe. For this week in the news, let's talk water quality and why it's so dang important industry. Last week in Toledo, Ohio, 5 companies have agreed to pay the federal government more than $7.2 million overall to resolve claims stemming from longstanding pollution into 2 adjacent creeks in the Maumee River watershed in northwestern Ohio. My family lives in Toledo and fishes and hunts and utilizes this river. And let's face it, we don't have an EPA today without the Burning River incident in Ohio. So here we're back. The settlement with Ohio Refining Company, Chevron USA, Energy Transfer, Pilkington, North America, and Chemtrade Logistics was announced on January 8th by the U.S. Department of Justice officials. They stated that a federal judge must approve the deal before it takes effect, according to the complaint. These companies are liable for historic industrial discharge of oil or hazardous substances at the Duck and Otter Creek site near Toledo. This site is just east of the Maumee River and encompasses the creeks, adjoining wetlands, floodplain areas, and uplands. Again, we've talked a lot about the waters of the United States and the importance, and I know we needed to have the SACIT versus the EPA, and we are all over the different discussions, but here it is again, some pollutants get into a floodplain and head for a watershed. And then next thing you know, they are heading for the Great Lakes, impacting our ecosystems. These 2 creeks flow into the Maumee Bay and Lake Erie and provide key habitat for migratory birds and fish, and also support hunting and fishing activities for local residents. This is according to the Ohio wildlife officials. This is why the waters of the United States are navigable waters and holding people accountable. 7.8 million doesn't seem like a lot to fix that much damage. With that said, also last week on January 8th, the National Academy of Sciences released the latest study of microplastics in water. This study focused on the microplastics in bottled water and stated that the average is 240,000 particles per liter. And this came from a joint study of Columbia University and Rutgers, who did the calculations. If we go back and we look last summer and last fall, there were multiple microplastic research studies that have come out about microplastics in the ocean, to freshwater lakes, to our Great Lakes, and the municipal wastewater systems. The Associated Press published an excellent article last Monday, January 8th, by Saf Borenstein, titled "Scientists Find About 250,000 Invisible Nanoplastic Particles in a Liter Bottle of Water." And as soon as that story dropped, we saw Time have their story. We saw PBS come out with a story, NPR, all talking microplastics. This isn't the first time we've talked about it, but now we're talking about them at a 83 micron size. For all of us solids control geeks out there, sand-sized particles, that underflow screen is 200 mesh, 74 microns. So we're talking smaller than that. Journalist Seth Borenstein retrieved a statement from the International Bottled Water Association stating, this is what they stated: "There currently is both a lack of standardized measuring methods and no scientific consensus on the potential health impacts of nano and microplastic particles. Therefore, media reports about these particles in drinking water do nothing more than unnecessarily scare consumers." Oh, does this get me upset? We've talked a ton about microplastics in our industry, especially the wastewater and water industry, and how they affect our wastewater treatment facilities, which are very aging infrastructures, as we've talked. And you want to talk about, again, why it's so important that we're drilling great, well-constructed groundwater wells, is statements like this, because it's ironic that they're saying unnecessary scare tactics, as we see studies on the Great Lakes stating nearly 90% of the water samples taken from the Great Lakes over the last 10 years exceeded safe levels for water, aquatic life, wildlife, etc. Researchers from the University of Toronto and the Winnipeg-based International Institute for Sustainable Development came to this conclusion after conducting a comprehensive review of microplastic studies. They state, at the levels surveyed, the researchers say fish and other aquatic wildlife are at risk of ingesting enough microplastics to fill their guts, diluting their regular food and its nutritional value. It's a circle of life. We have industrial trades. We have paper industries. There's plenty of places where we see where we are producing microplastics into the constructions, textiles. All of these facilities have been on our rivers forever. And here we are. Again, why do you think the water is the United States? And we jumped up and down so much last year. We're going to continue that fight this year. In a pair of papers published on August 21st, 2023 in the Canadian Journal of Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences, the research team, Atali is our doctor, her team argued that they may have already been measurable risks from microplastics to aquatic wildlife in parts of the Great Lakes. They did not directly address the risks to human health because there isn't enough data to propose widely accepted thresholds. They go on to say, with that said, there are several ways microplastics can harm organisms, including people. Some of the petrochemicals used to make plastics cause cancer, while others mimic hormones which can trigger processes such as early puberty. The researchers found that the main source of microplastics in the Great Lakes are from microfibers from textiles, pre-production plastic pellets from industries, tires and road wear particles from roadways, and foam from constructions. With all of this said, based on the conclusions of this report and many others, the World Health Organization in 2029 released these recommendations. And I just want to show that, as we're saying, unnecessarily scaring people, we as an industry need to be putting out the facts and the figures and fighting for what's important for us. And the World Health Organization recommendations are: water suppliers and regulators should continue to prioritize removing microbial pathogens and chemicals from drinking water that are known significant risks to human health, including microplastics. As part of the water safety planning, water suppliers should ensure that control measures are effective, including optimizing water treatment processes for particle removal and microbial safety, which will incidentally improve the removal of microplastic particles. Routine monitoring of microplastics in drinking water is not necessary at this time, and this is at this time of 2019. But what are we looking at? 240,000 particles in a liter bottle of water. They needed time to state to better assess the human health risks and inform management action. Researchers should undertake targeted, well-designed, and quality-controlled investigative studies to better understand the occurrence of microplastics in the water cycle and in drinking water throughout the water supply chain. Our water infrastructure is over 100 years old. I want you, as you're driving down the roads and you start looking at our rural water and wastewater facilities, was your grandfather a young man when they were being built? The source of microplastic pollution and the uptake hit the health effects, and exposure scenarios are going to increase. They go on to state human health risks posed by exposure to microplastics in drinking water measures should be taken by policymakers and the public to better manage plastics and reduce the use of plastics where possible to minimize their release into the environment, because these actions can confer other benefits to the environment and human well-being. What do we got? We got JetX chemicals, we got PFAS, we got microplastics, we got nitrates, we got phosphates. We have all of these running into our waters of the United States, into our water ecosystem, that are then going to continue to impact drinking water and possibly, in situations, groundwater. We need to be paying attention and well informed on how the progression of waters of the United States and the EPA are going to be able to control these factors in 2024 as we go into election time. That's something you need to be thinking about and advocating, and we should be talking about at state shows right now and with the National Groundwater Association. For our feature, we're going to go back to October 31st, 2023, where Edd Schofield and I talked about wells from hell, one of the Johnson groundwater screen gurus of our industry. We had a great outline of how to prevent a well from hell. However, our conversation went long, like many of the conversations that happen on the newscast, and we had a great counterpoint discussion about polyacrylamides, well construction, solids control, and the benefits that we need to be looking at. And so I want to give you the rest of that story, starting with me outlining those counterpoints and the great discussion that we had, because these are the type of discussions at state shows when we don't have the highest attendance, like the NGWA show that we had just this year, where we have more time to take a breath and have longer conversations. This is the stuff we should be talking about. I hope you enjoy. First and foremost, if we go back to your discussion on, videoing and taking photos as we start a project, we take for granted in this industry that there's only 23 million private water wells out there. Or that, that's not that many. When you look at 330 million Americans and you start looking at, 85% of our country has municipal water. And if we look at municipal water, groundwater, well water, it is only about this much versus what we see as reservoirs and rivers. Although any of us with any hydrology background go, wait a minute, where do you think that water came from in the life cycle? So it is very important, because same as COVID, we now have more people living in rural areas, and we have gotten to a point where we can grow as an industry with private water wells, or rural water systems that we see popping up. It's just, we're a very proud industry. I don't think we realize that there are a lot of people that are like, oh, so that you're going to dig a well today, that, they're thinking of it as it's the Dust Bowl era, and this is an antiquated way. Oh gosh, I got to control my own water system now, when it's a blessing. So I think when we show up on site, we have those issues of people going, oh no, we need to be surgical, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
there are camera phones, there are people watching. There's a lot happening that 25 years ago there wasn't a smartphone with a camera.
Yeah. Well, and another point, Brock, is the simple fact that advertising what you're doing for the community's benefit. I mean, there's a lot of municipalities that will put a sign up a couple of months before the rig shows up, and it will tell you that we are improving the water quality of the community. And we are, in fact, making sure that we've got resilience. And so that gives everybody a warm, fuzzy feeling. And that's ultimately what we want to do. Building adverse relationships on a job site with the contractor and the well owner, or even any of the neighbors, is not going to go a long way. We've got to be putting our best foot forward and, indicating that fresh water, potable water, is in fact in everybody's best interest.
Moving on, polyacrylamides and bentonite. Obviously, I have a mud engineer background, along with growing up in this industry, and Newcastle yellow sodium bentonite. We've started depleting it, so our quality is not what it was. And
Correct.
So yes, we start adding extender polymers in there. We have shear degradation that's happening. We have there's plenty of questions to be asked, and the same as having the right manufacturer on site to be able to give you the heart of the well, the screen. The same comes with that reputable fluids engineer, and having those discussions and diving deeper into rheology and all the aspects that we can get into, because you are absolutely right. The more of those extender polymers we have in there, the more they break down in unyielded bentonite that we end up using in the bottom of the hole, because we're trying to get lifting characteristics because we just don't quite have the hole cleaning we need. It's all going out into that porosity zone. Polyacrylamides, sodium hyperchlorite only. Calcium hypochlorite's not going to break it up. But bigger piece there, if we're going to talk drilling fluid systems, and we're going to talk from reverse to just mud rotary, however we're going to do it, they don't have filtration control. So, as that's became that great extender and it's given us viscosity, we didn't gain anything in containing where those muds are going to end up out there. And so if we're not running a PAC polyanionic cellulose in there to tighten up that filter cake and have good filtration control, we're there. And we've lost some of that knowledge in the well from hell scenario. When you hear, okay, so what did you mix? Oh, we ended up using a pallet of bentonite, Brock. And it's like, how deep was the well? 500 feet. What size? Oh, it's 12 and a quarter. Well, whoa, if I look at my fluid volume, that mud had to go somewhere, and we have to back out. And suddenly, with that filter cake and everything that's gone into that porosity zone on top of that gravel against that screen, there's no hydraulic energy in the world that's going to get out there. And getting to go to the groundwater and well school, we talked a lot about that a few years back. And you're absolutely right. Having that test of that fluid, having that test for water, looking at every base and covering that, from a complex private home well to a well for some sort of dispensary, or getting into that big municipality. Heck yeah, I want to know how many solids, desirable or undesirable, I had in that fluid, and I want to be able to say, hey, I had a 12 cc water loss at the bottom of this hole, and I had this nice tight filter cake, and I broke it all up. If not, we as drillers blame Mother Nature, and everybody else blames us because it's the unknown and nobody can tell you what's right or wrong.
And the simple fact is, knowing that it's there just means we need to take one additional step, and it is superchlorinating the well, not for disinfection, but to simply remove those polyacrylamides, get those loosened up. So then a mud dispersant can go back in, break up the clay platelets, suspend them, and then allow us to get that all back out of the hole. And again, that video at the end of the day oftentimes tells us how successful we were, you know. And even though we got a clean cylinder, a clean screen, we still can have an awful lot of locked up material back behind us. So it does take more effort today than it ever used to get a good well. And it's simply because of some of the supply chain changes, some of the issues that we've got, and the additives that are in there, and we have to address them today.
And fuel, if I'm looking at time over hole and I need to get that, let's face it, a 40,000 pound rig now is north of $1 million, and a 60,000 and up is north of 1.2 million, and it's burning 35 gallons an hour. You know, and when I was just out your way last week, and I saw diesel anywhere from the bottom end, 4.30 a gallon to 5.57, and I know it can go up higher. So of course we got the well in, we got the screen in, we've started some good development. We feel that we have enough, production, and we lose the initiative because the longer that stuff sits back there unyielded and yields out, it's the last beautiful point. You had many beautiful points in this situation of our scary well, I would say, is absolutely in circulation or supply chain. I'm not going to drill that porosity zone until I'm ready, because once I put that filter cake in there, I can break it up, but
they're
it's
hard,
not good. And I've heard wells from hells in municipalities way too many times on the fact that, oh, well, we got the samples, we got the screens on order, but then we couldn't get the right gravel pack, or you couldn't get things, or extreme weather. We now have a point in this industry where it's not uncommon that you could have 5 or 8 days of big storms that are going to shut that job down.
Oh yeah.
And suddenly, all I'm thinking about the entire time is, man, did I condition that hole and I got an 8.8 mud, something under 5% solids? Or do I have something that's 7, 8, 9, 10% solids just sitting there, just becoming thixotropic and just gelling up?
It's just making it that much difficult. That's more difficult for us to get that cleaned up simply by the simple fact of waiting. Yeah. So there's an adage that no good comes from idle teenagers or idle wells. And that is the same for drilling and completing as it is for letting a well sit idle. You just can't wait on these things. So yeah, anticipating and scheduling. If you got to slow down your drilling, or you got to go ahead and make allowances, do so. Steve Schmidt with Johnson Screens has an adage that contractors are constantly up against, and that is the 5 cursed words of we've always done it that way. But we have to start looking at doing things differently now, because there are it's a different world, it's a different environment. Post COVID has made a remarkable difference in our world.
Ed, you're living in the biggest water crisis we've seen in our country, in the Western US. And as we look at the mountain states, or California, Nevada, and Arizona just released, their new conservation to 2026. And so everything that's come back for the tribal nations, anywhere else, is, hey, just go and get that cheap, pumpable, obtainable groundwater. That's what we got to do. And all of us are sitting back and going, wait. Yes, we can get good, pumpable groundwater. Don't think it's going to be cheap or quickly obtainable if we're going to do it the right way.
Yeah. No different than energy costs. Water costs are escalating. It's becoming, it's meeting its actual value. And we're going to have to reevaluate many things that we're looking at right now. But from a groundwater standpoint, we want to be true to what we do. We want to do the very best things we possibly can, and make sure that our side of the street is clean, because they will find opportunities to try to suspend. Holding back permits Yeah, that's a challenge that we're going to be hard pressed to address. So we've got to make sure we keep our side of the street clean.
Absolutely. With the Department of Interior looking at how water should be distributed from the Colorado,
Yeah.
or many other, water basins, how quickly does it become, how qualified are you to be, you know,
Oh,
punching into that production? So, and with Texas, with the Edwards Aquifer and the Trinity, we've already seen it. But, there are plenty of those situations that we really need to, consider,
sure.
that we either become surgical and show that the several $1 million worth of equipment we have on site is, our college degree, our worth, or we get regulated in a different way.
Oh, absolutely. And if we're not careful, we will be regulated in a different way. Absolutely.
And that's the scariest thing for me out of no well for hell. It's you know, one morning waking up and going, wait, so you can't drill wells anymore in that watershed?
Yeah. Oh, in certain areas with subsidence and such being the other side of the coin. I mean, the fact that canals are no longer flowing because universally the subsidence has been so devastating that canals no longer flow. So $500 million to fix a mistake like that. Yeah, they're looking at us. They're looking at where'd the water go? How did it get pulled? Well, I'm going to leave you with this bit of information from the standpoint the wealth from hell can be limited by a couple of key points, and that is communication, preparation, and execution. And the one thing we really want to try to avoid is being remembered as that guy. We just don't want to be that guy. And it simply means we've got to be that much more diligent in what we do, preparing and working with others, communicating, and trying to go and get the best possible completion into the timeliest manner. So, yeah, Brock, I appreciate it. I enjoyed this very much.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Thank you for joining us for episode 92 of the Driller Newscast. Please go check out thedriller.com with all the great content that's coming out. Check out those first 4 emerging driller stories that we released, and there's more of those to come. Be present and active at your state groundwater association shows. I will see you in Minnesota and Illinois and Michigan and Virginia and Maryland off the top of my head. I'm sure there's a couple more that I'm supposed to be at as well. Let's have a great conversation. If you got some stories you want to talk about on the newscast, we'd love to hear them. And again, dang it, why I'm talking about microplastics in water right now, the Great Lakes, groundwater well construction, is because these are the things that are going to be on the forefront for 2024 as we go into this election year. And what is important to us and Waters of the United States is not done. We need to be present, and we need to be the groundwater professionals who are driving the right policy. Go out, be safe, make sure to use the stop work authority when you see something that could turn into a catastrophic event, or you just don't feel right about a situation. Circle everybody up. Let's be smart, industry. Cheers.